All right, thanks, Pete. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this afternoon. My name is Brian Moore. I'm a senior data visualization and analytics consultant with Clear Intelligence. And today I'm going to be sharing a little bit about my experiences with Tableau. So typically, I like to start presentations with a little bit of background about myself, but since this whole presentation is kind of about my background, I'll keep this part very brief. So as I mentioned, I'm a senior data viz consultant with Clear Intelligence. I've been there for about 2 years now. I've been using Tableau for about 7 years, but just somewhat recently started getting involved with the Tableau community back in 2019. I'm currently a Tableau Visionary, formerly known as Zen Master, and a Tableau Public Ambassador. And in all of my free time, I also co-lead the Boston Tableau User Group. I blog on a site that I co-run with my wife, Jackie Moore, called DoMoreWithData.com. I'm a Tableau mentor and just general Tableau fanatic. Funny enough, my wife, Jackie, is also a Tableau ambassador, also a co-leader of the Boston Tableau User Group, and also a senior data viz consultant with Clear Intelligence. So I guess you could say we have a lot in common. So I'm going to kick things off with my Tableau story and some of the events, milestones and people that have had just a massive impact on my career and really my life in general. Then I'll give my top tips for mastering Tableau based on my experiences. And then the second half of the session will be dedicated to Q&A. So as Pete mentioned, if you have questions along the way, please just drop them in the chat or in the Q&A, and we'll talk about them at the end. So my story started back in January of 2015 when I first heard the name Tableau. So at the time I was working at EMC as a forecast analyst. I had spent close to a decade after college in various analytic roles. My degree was in operations management, where I learned a lot about math, a lot about analytics, but very little about analytic tools. But there was one tool that was used everywhere I went, and I got really, really, really good with it. You could even say I excelled using it, and I immediately apologize for that when I'm picking. But back to 2015, I had a full suite of reports that I built out in Excel, a bunch of Excel-based tools that I was using for forecasting. Of course, none of it was automated. We weren't able to connect directly to databases with Excel, so this meant dumping a bunch of reports out of business objects and pasting them into tabs in these tools, running a bunch of VBA to semi-automate them. But all in all, I was spending probably close to a full day each week just updating these tools and reports. At the same time, my wife was working as an analyst for a company called EBSCO, and they had just bought her a license for a tool called Tableau. And she was all in right from the start. She would rave about it, how awesome it was, all the cool things you could do with it. But I wasn't sold. I was all in on Excel. I put years into mastering it. It's what every company was using, and I didn't need to learn anything else, especially some fad software I'd never even heard of. Then a few months later, I got an email at work that EMC was doing a pilot with Tableau, and they asked me if I wanted a license. So I went back to my wife, and even though I had shot her down on many previous attempts, she was kind enough to give me a demo, and I was just blown away. I knew as soon as I saw it, it was a game changer. I had to learn it. So I said farewell to Excel reports, and I started on my journey with Tableau. This over here is the first dashboard I had ever built, along with Jackie, and this was for our birth announcement for our son. Looking back at it, there are definitely some things I would do differently, but at the time, this was amazing. This was the coolest report I'd ever seen. So within weeks of receiving my Tableau license, my wife let me know that her team was hiring for a Tableau developer. And even though I had literally weeks of experience with the tool, I applied and was offered the position. Luckily, it was for a really great boss who hired me because she saw potential rather than just based on my experience. But the fact that I was hired to work with a specific tool and had next to zero experience with it meant I had a lot to learn and not a lot of time to learn it. But luckily, my wife, who had much more experience than I did, was sitting about 6 feet away, and I could just bug her with questions all day, every day. But to get up to speed quickly, I focused on 3 different things. The first was the free learning resources on Tableau's website. So if you haven't seen them before, definitely check them out. There are a ton of short videos, like between 3 to 10 minutes long, covering different elements of Tableau development, like connecting to data sources, creating calculations, and then all the way up through publishing and sharing your work. The second was to take existing dashboards at my company and reverse engineer them to figure out how they were built. So I would download a workbook, connect to the same data source, and then rebuild it sheet by sheet, object by object, until I had an exact replica. And if I couldn't figure out how to replicate something, I would ask, and I asked a lot. So asking questions was really key to getting up to speed quickly. Tableau is a very user-friendly tool, but there's just so much you can do with it and so many different ways that you can do something. And when you're first getting started, you really don't even know what's possible. You don't know what you don't know. So asking questions is key. I stayed at EBSCO for about 2.5 years, and I learned a ton in that time. My team was absolutely incredible. Most of them actually work for Clear Intelligence now. But in December of 2017, I was offered a position as an enrollment analyst at Bentley University. So at the time, I wanted to be a data scientist, and I was offered free tuition to one of the best Masters in Analytics programs in the country, so I had to take it. But as it turns out, I was already doing what I love and what I want to do for the rest of my career, and I didn't really need another degree to do that. So I ended up staying at Bentley for a while, but my time in that master's program was pretty short-lived. But anyways, going to work at the BI team or at Bentley was kind of a strange transition for me. I went from being the least experienced person on my team to being the most experienced. I became the go-to guy for all Tableau questions and for all the really high-profile projects. And it was during that time at Bentley that I realized that I really liked helping people with Tableau questions and sharing Tableau knowledge. It was for a pretty small team, but it was still really gratifying. As I mentioned before, a lot of my team from EBSCO ended up at Clear Intelligence, but the first to leave was my wife, Jackie. So she went to Clear Intelligence right around the same time that I went to Bentley. And in the summer of 2018, she told me about an event that Clear Intelligence was hosting at Fenway Park called Chart Champ. And if you haven't heard of Chart Champ, it's an annual event. It's always at an incredible venue. It's full of free trainings, tons of networking opportunities, great food and drink. And every year it caps off with a data viz competition to crown that year's Chart Champ. And it's usually held in September or October. So if you're in the Boston area, definitely keep an eye out for that. But that year's competition was using real pitching data from the Boston Red Sox. At that point, I never built anything in Tableau that wasn't for work. I had definitely never thought about competing, but this was just such a cool opportunity. So for the next few weeks, I spent pretty much every night working on my submission, which is right over here. It was actually pretty cool. You could select a pitcher and select a game, and you could walk through every single pitch, see the result, the type of pitch, the location, the speed, break, rotation, and all kinds of cool metrics. And you can see how all of these metrics changed and developed throughout the game. I think that year they had around 75 submissions, and the top 5 were invited to present their dashboards at Fenway in front of a panel of judges, including some members of the Boston Red Sox analytics team, which was really cool. This was my first time doing any kind of public speaking, and it was in front of about 300 people, which was absolutely terrifying, but it was also one of the coolest experiences of my life, even though I didn't win, but it was a close second. So Chart Champ was my first experience building a visualization that wasn't for work, and it was be a couple more months before I built another one. But late in 2018 and early 2019, I was feeling really stagnant at work. I was good at Tableau, but I wasn't really getting any better. I wasn't really feeling challenged. The work started feeling really repetitive, and I wanted to explore something new. I had even started considering a career change. But once again, my wife Jackie came to the rescue, and she had recently started getting involved with the community. Participating in various community initiatives, publishing our work to Tableau Public, and sharing and discussing on Twitter. If you're not already aware, there's a very active and incredibly supportive and generous community of Tableau users on Twitter, and LinkedIn as well. There are also a number of community-led initiatives where the organizers will share data sets or topics. Participants will create their own visualizations, and then a lot of times there's some sort of feedback aspect to it as well. Projects like Workout Wednesday, Iron Quest, and so many others. I had created a Twitter account about 5 years before that and had never used it, but figured I would dust it off and give it a try. And after a little bit of searching, I came across SportsViz Sunday. So each month they share data related to a specific sport or sporting event. But they also, encourage people to share really any sports related business. And I'm a huge NFL fan, and this was during the 2018-2019 playoffs. So I decided to build a viz to see how the conference championships teams stack up. And I think this was in January of 2019. This was my first Tableau public viz. And, I shared it on Twitter, and I was just amazed at the response. All of a sudden, strangers from all over the world were welcoming me to the data fam. They were, liking my viz and retweeting it, commenting on it. I had a couple of people actually reach out to me directly with some really good feedback, and it was really, really cool. And I was hooked from the start. I wanted to build and share more work, but I also wanted to see what other people were building. So I started following all of the Zen Masters and Ambassadors, and then following the people that they follow until my feed was just chock full of data viz inspiration. And every day I would see things that people built in Tableau that just honestly didn't even seem possible, and I had to know how they did it. And the cool thing about Tableau Public is that most people make their workbooks available for download. So I was right back where I started, downloading people's workbooks and figuring out how stuff worked. And if I couldn't figure out how it worked, I would message them on Twitter, and 99 times out of 100, they would be thrilled to go into detail about how they built something and why they did it a certain way. So if you've ever looked at my Tableau Public profile, you probably noticed that there aren't a lot of bar charts or line charts on there. Most of what I do on Tableau Public is probably more data art and data visualization, things that I would never attempt in my day job. Mainly because they go against almost all data viz best practices, but they're a lot of fun to build, they're fun to look at, fun to interact with. And I spend all day, every day building business dashboards at work. So if I'm going to spend my evenings in Tableau too, I want it to feel different. I like to spend that time, exploring and kind of seeing what's possible, trying to push the boundaries of Tableau. And in every viz I create, I try to do something that at least I've never done before. And in doing that, I ended up learning so many things about Tableau that I could incorporate back into my day job. Between engaging with the community and exploration on my own, I learned more in that first 6 months to a year in the community than I did in the previous 4 years of learning on my own. It's really difficult to learn in a vacuum. You have to go out there and see what other people are doing. But more importantly, it revamped my love for Tableau and it got me really excited and motivated to learn and to do more, both at work and in my spare time. About 6 months after joining the community, I attended a virtual higher ed conference and watched a session from Zen Master, now Visionary, Ken Flerledge, titled 4 Tips for Mastering Tableau. So Ken had gone from a new user to a Zen Master in just 3 years, and this talk was, kind of about how that happened, what that process looked like. He also wrote up the presentation as a blog post, which I definitely recommend to anyone. I still go back to it frequently. And I actually reached out to him right after the presentation for advice and was just blown away by how supportive and how willing to help he was. If you don't know Ken and his twin brother, Kevin, they're just 2 of the smartest, most supportive, generous people I know, and they've helped me along my Tableau journey more times than I can count. They're both awesome. But anyways, the 4 tips that Ken shared in his presentation in the blog post are to train, practice, engage, and teach. So up to this point, I'd done a ton of training and practicing. I recently started engaging, but that last tip was something I hadn't really done much of, outside of my small team at Bentley. But here's a quote from that blog post. So you can learn a lot by switching gears and attempting to teach Tableau. Many studies have shown that teaching is an incredibly effective way to learn. To teach something, you need to really understand it inside and out. It also forces you to be able to verbalize something that you may have never had to verbalize before. And I can't emphasize how true that is. Around the same time, I had been messaging back and forth with a man from India named Vinod. He was a regular participant in Sportsman Sunday, and he would send me his vizzes all the time before publishing them to ask for feedback, which I really enjoyed doing. And the day after Ken's presentation, Mark Bradford, who was a leader in the community, and he's now an employee at Tableau, he shared a link about an initiative called Mentoring Meetup, where he would help match people who were new to Tableau to kind of seasoned Data Viz professionals. So Vinod sent me the link and asked if I would be his mentor, and the timing couldn't have been any better. It was just kind of serendipitous. I never thought of myself as a mentor, but really this was the perfect opportunity to move towards that fourth step to start teaching. And mentoring has been one of the most rewarding experiences of my career. And Ken was absolutely right. Teaching others really requires a deeper understanding of the material, and I've learned just so much throughout this process. I've since mentored or currently mentor probably a dozen individuals around the world, but my first mentee, Vinod, is now also a Tableau Visionary, which is just incredible. Being able to see every part of somebody's journey from beginner to master, it's difficult to explain what that's like or how much it means to me, but I really can't recommend mentorships enough in both sides, both being a mentor and being mentored. All right, so Las Vegas 2019. This was not my first Tableau conference. I think it may have been my fourth, but this one was totally different than any of the others. So this was the first conference since I started getting more involved with the Tableau community, and it was a completely different experience. In prior years, I kind of kept to myself or to the small group that I traveled with, but this year I felt like I knew everybody. It was became less about going to hands-on sessions and learning specific things, and more about conversations, and networking, and getting inspired, and energized, and excited. And I actually got to be a little bit more involved at this conference. So I had the honor of representing the Boston Tableau User Group at the Community Tips Battle, which, if you're not familiar with, it's a conference tradition, and it's basically a friendly competition between members of user groups all over the world. So 12 people face off in kind of a head-to-head bracket-style competition, doing demoing their best Tableau tips and tricks, and then the two finalists have to do a live dashboard build, kind of Iron Fist style, in like 10 minutes. So each year there's a theme, and although costumes are not required, they are strongly encouraged. And that year's theme was superheroes, so I went as my alter ego, Chart Ken, which is this guy right here. I think that was my second time public speaking, and once again, it was in front of a pretty large audience, but it was a lot of fun and probably my favorite memory of any Tableau conference. But there was actually a session right before that tips battle, which I attended in costume, that I will truly never forget. It's not often that a conference session can change your life, but that was actually the case here. So the session was called Beyond Show Me, and it was presented by none other than Ken and Kevin Flerledge, who I mentioned earlier. And the theme of the session was on building really customized charts in Tableau. So, things beyond what you can do with the Show Me options in Tableau Desktop. So they talked about how the canvas in Tableau is essentially just a Cartesian plane. And if you could calculate the X and Y coordinates, you can literally build anything. And that was a huge, huge light bulb moment for me. A pretty simple statement, but something I had never really considered or really known. With my Tableau public work up to this point, I was kind of stuck in a box, just trying to use standard chart types in creative ways. But this one statement, this one idea, opened up a world of possibilities. So I was flooded with ideas and inspiration. All I needed to do was learn some math. I hadn't used trig or geometry since high school, but if it meant building cool stuff in Tableau, I was all for it. And I learned or relearned most of that math from blog posts on the Flerledge's website or by reaching out to them directly. Because as I mentioned before, those guys and this community in general are amazing and just always willing to help. So that session really helped me find my own unique style for data visualization. And it's the reason I'm a Tableau Public Ambassador and one of the main reasons I'm now a Tableau Visionary. So I came back from that conference inspired, energized, and motivated, and I wanted to do more. The community had already given me so much, and I wanted to start giving back. I was doing some mentoring, but I wanted to reach more people. That year, I had also started getting more involved with the local Tableau community, and in December 2019, I joined the Boston Tug leadership team. Unfortunately, that was right before the pandemic hit. I think we were only able to do one live event before we had to go virtual, but that virtual environment has actually provided some really nice opportunities. So we've been able to get speakers that we normally wouldn't be able to travel to Boston for events. We've been able to share our events with a wider audience because anyone can attend virtually. And along that same thread, it's opened up a lot of speaking opportunities for me. So in the past couple of years, I've got to, got to present tugs all over the world, which has been a really amazing experience. Around the same time, my mentee Vinod approached my wife and I with an idea for a new community project. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals, but it's a set of interrelated goals aimed at just really improving the lives of all people, focusing on things like poverty, hunger, education, gender equality, climate action, pretty much anything you can think of. So we launched the Sdg Biz Project, where each month we focused on one of these 17 goals. We shared data for participants to visualize. We created visualizations ourselves. We provided feedback on the submissions, and we blogged about what we learned and how our community could contribute to that month's goal. So if you look at my Tableau public profile, you see that a lot of my visualizations are based on one of these goals. But this was a really pivotal month for me. It was a transition to more of a, I guess, leadership role in the community and an opportunity to reach and help a lot more people, which is something that I really wanted to focus on. All right, and on to February 2020. So at this point, I had been working at Bentley for a little over 2 years. I had done a ton of work during that time, but it got to a point where I didn't really have anything new to work on. I had already explored all the pet projects I could think of. My boss basically just told me to work on my Tableau public stuff until something came up, which is cool, but it's not really what I wanted. That stuff was extra, something I did in my spare time, but I still wanted a meaningful and fulfilling career. I had been flirting with the idea of consulting for a while, starting back at that first chart champ where one of the partners at Clear Intelligence tried to recruit me. But I wanted to make sure that the timing was right. I wanted to make sure it was the right decision for my family, and I wanted to make sure that that was good enough to do it. And finally, the timing seemed right. I decided to take the leap, and it has been hands down one of the best decisions of my life. So for somebody like me, somebody who loves data, loves to help people, loves to learn, there really is no better job than a consultant. I get to work with a lot of different people. I work with really diverse data sets and face new and interesting challenges every day. And Clear Intelligence is just an amazing company. I couldn't be happier. I work with some of the most brilliant data people I've ever met. The partners are incredible. The work we do is meaningful, and we're really, really good at what we do. And we are hiring, so feel free to reach out to me anytime if you're looking for a change as well. Back to the story. So I've been asked a lot about how I handled the transition to consulting. For me, it was simultaneously easy and difficult, but in very different ways. At Bentley and EBSCO before that, I had always done project work. It's kind of like an internal consultant moving from one unique project to the next. So that piece was pretty easy. The hardest part was getting over the imposter syndrome. So as a consultant, you're supposed to be the best of the best, someone who knows everything there is to know. But the truth is, nobody knows everything. There's always something to learn. And I think that's what makes a really great consultant. Somebody who knows a lot, somebody who's really good at what they do, but they're also willing to admit when they don't know something, and they're driven to learn it, to find an answer, and to come up with a creative solution. And honestly, I think having some level of imposter syndrome is healthy. It keeps us humble. It keeps us hungry to learn and improve. It's not necessarily a reflection of your skills. It's a reflection of your desire to just be better. So I'm grateful for it, and I don't think it ever goes away, no matter what level you reach. It's something I still have to this day, and that's true for a lot of other visionaries and ambassadors that I've spoken with. And speaking of ambassadors, in August 2020, I was asked to become a Tableau ambassador. So if you're not familiar with the ambassador program, Each year, Tableau selects a group of people to represent different aspects of the community. So they're ambassadors for the forums, the user groups, Tableau Public, social media, data devs, student ambassadors, and the recently added CRM ambassadors. So I'm a Tableau Public Ambassador, and here's the description of that group from Tableau's website. So Tableau Public Ambassadors showcase the power of Tableau with the incredible visualizations they share with the community. They welcome newcomers to the Tableau Public platform by creating a healthy space for feedback, appreciation, and connection. And what's really cool is that my wife, Jackie, who, if you couldn't tell, has had an enormous impact on my career, was selected to be a social media ambassador that same year. So getting to share this honor with her was really, really special. And this acknowledgement wasn't something that had a real profound impact on my career, but it was really important to me. It's validation that everything I had been doing was meaningful, that my skills and creativity were unique, and that the work I was doing with the community was impactful. Years of recognition for years of hard work and late nights, and though I wasn't doing any of that for the recognition, it was really nice to be a part of this group. All right, now fast forward to somewhat recent history. In December 2021, Jackie and I launched our new blogging site, DoMoreWithData.com. So we've been talking about doing it for a few years, and we finally made it happen. I had done some blogging in the past, but it was more of as a guest contributor to somebody else's blog. The site was called sonsofhierarchies.com, run by Mark Bradburn, who I mentioned earlier. And that was a really awesome experience. I loved working with Mark, but I really wanted something that could call my own, something that I could really shape and experiment with. And so far, it's been going great. I love writing, I love helping people, and I love sharing my somewhat unique approach to data art and visualization. And there's something about writing things down that really solidifies things in your mind. In the past, I've always had to revisit old workbooks to see how I did something or what calculations I used. But now it's all consolidated, which is really nice. I have to look up stuff a lot less frequently, and when I do, I have a centralized location to do that. So please check out our site. It's called DoMoreWithData.com. There are a bunch of fun posts out there now. We have a lot more planned for this year. And all of the content is also available on ClearIntelligence's website, which is clearintelligence.com. And on to the latest chapter in my Tableau story. So this year I was selected as a Tableau Visionary. If you're not familiar with the Zen Master Visionary program, it's a small group of individuals that are selected each year, usually around 40 or 45 people who have gone above and beyond with their contributions to the community. And it's based on kind of three different facets: Tableau mastery, teaching, and collaboration. And I really can't tell you how much this means to me, and honestly still can't really believe it. It's not something that I set out to do or something that I even thought was possible, but I'm just beyond thrilled. And again, it's not something that's had a significant impact on my career. I'm sure it would help if I was in the job market, but it is incredibly meaningful to me, and I'm feeling more motivated than ever to really get back to the community and to share everything that I've learned over the past close to a decade now. All right, so that is my Tableau journey from newbie to visionary, and kind of all of the notable events that shaped my career along the way. People ask me all the time how they can improve their Tableau skills, so here are my top tips for upping your Tableau game. So my top tip for anybody new to Tableau and looking to grow your skills quickly is to marry somebody who's already good at Tableau. Go work for their company, sit a few feet away from them, and bombard them with questions all day. I realize that might not be an option for everybody. It works great for me, but might not work well for everyone else. But a great backup plan is to find yourself a mentor. Find somebody you can go to anytime to ask questions or to get advice. It can be somebody you work with, it can be somebody from the community. It doesn't have to be a formal mentorship. I've never had a formal mentor, but I've had a lot of people that I look to as mentors, like my wife, the Furlages, some of the great bosses I've had along the way that really encouraged me to learn. So go find your go-to person, somebody you can always look to for support. Next, take advantage of learning opportunities. Whether it's free, self-paced learning, attending Tableau user groups, conferences, formal training, reading blogs, all of these things. Just take every opportunity you can to learn. Even if you think you know everything, trust me, there are a million things out there that you can learn. Next, be curious. If you see something done in Tableau and you don't know how it was done, find out. So download the workbook and try to build it yourself. If you can't figure out how to do it, just ask the person who did it. If it's something you see on Tableau Public, it can be a little scary reaching out to strangers. But in my experience, 99% of the time, they'll be thrilled to talk to you about it. That's just how this community is. They love to share knowledge, and they're very, very generous with their time. Next, get inspired. Join the Tableau community and start following people. The visionaries and ambassadors are a great place to start. Follow them, see who they interact with, and then follow those people, and soon you'll have just an endless stream of inspiration in your Twitter feed. And spend some time exploring Tableau Public. The new Discover page makes it really easy to explore visualizations from a very diverse group of authors. You can also sign up for Visit a Day to get inspiration sent to you every day, which is pretty awesome. And if you have the opportunity, go to the next Tableau conference. Maybe not the next one, because that's like next week, but definitely the one after that. Next, get involved. Create a Tableau Public profile, find a community project that interests you, and start participating. Start sharing your work, and more importantly, start sharing other people's work. That's another great thing about this community, is that we're really good at lifting each other up. Very welcoming and including anybody that wants to be a part of it. I really can't stress this piece enough. I've learned so much from this community, more than I ever could have learned on my own. So really get started today. Next, don't be afraid to ask. Ask questions, ask for feedback. You may feel like it's a burden asking somebody for help, but people love to help with this kind of stuff. I know I do. If you're uncomfortable asking strangers for help or feedback, you can ask me. I'm telling you right now, you can reach out to me anytime. I'd be more than happy to answer questions or give feedback. Next, start teaching. Cement everything you've learned by sharing it with others, whether it's through blogging, training, mentorships, or any other way you can think of to share what you've learned. It's incredible how much of a difference that makes. And then finally, just never stop learning. Just know that there's always something new to learn. Just go find it, learn it, and then go learn the next thing. So that's all I have for you today, but happy to open it up to questions if there are any.
So Brian, one of the questions we have in the chat, what do you find are your most engaging visualizations, and do you have any best practices on deployment techniques?
Sorry, could you repeat that? What are the most engaging?
Yeah, so what do you find to be your most engaging works that you've put out there, and do you have any best practices on deployment techniques?
So as far as like Tableau Public, it's not always the coolest or the prettiest business that get the most engagement. It's usually the ones that I've done that have gotten the most engagement. It's either a fun topic that people like to explore, or something really novel, something that people haven't seen before. So find something that really interests you, something that you're passionate about, and that'll really come through in the biz that you create. As far as deployment, I'm not really clear on that part of the question. I apologize. If it's how to share your work to get engagement, I typically share it on Twitter, LinkedIn. Occasionally I share it on Reddit, but beware, that's a kind of a minefield, sharing your work. Any other questions?
Yeah, don't be shy. If there's any questions, you can throw them in the chat. And if not, give you a minute. But if not, we thank everyone for spending the time with us this afternoon. Ryan, thank you for sharing the journey and your tips along the way. I like to post about how I am not the data person a lot, and that's sort of my perspective in this. And I got to say, as that person that is sort of on the outside looking in, I can totally speak to the inclusive and the reception of the community. You guys are such good communicators in terms of making things accessible to a broader audience. It's something that has made my transition into the world of data, a lot easier, and it speaks to a really powerful community. So I think that's been really cool. Okay, we got one. Would you recommend focusing on a viz or data art if you're growing your portfolio?
So, I mean, it really depends on what your goal is. If you are, creating your portfolio to help further your career and to, land a job in data visualization, then it's probably better to focus on, business type dashboards with more traditional charts. For me, at this point in my career, I use Tableau Public just for fun and, to build fun things. So for me, it's more about data art. The data art can definitely, help you in your job search as well. But yeah, I would say it really depends on what your goal is.
Do you have any advice that you would offer about training a new group of Tableau users that are just starting out?
Yeah, so I mean, there are a lot of different routes you can go. I mean, what worked best for me was the kind of self-paced learning. That might not be the same route for everybody. Some organizations prefer a more formal training approach, so you can either leverage internal resources in your company to provide like group training, or hire externally for formal training. There's a lot of organizations, including Clear Intelligence, that offer formal training. But yeah, I mean, for me, the self-paced learning was the way to go. Accessing some of those free resources, and then a lot of exploring just what's out there and trying to figure out how those things were done.
All right, someone was recently asked by a recruiter if they had a Tableau certification. They've used it for several years and had never come across that question. Would you recommend experienced users get a certification?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I would say, especially if you don't have a Tableau Public profile, because it's really hard to, I guess, prove your skills, but the certification can definitely help do that and help, separate yourself from other potential candidates.
All right. Well, I think unless I'll wait to give a pause for any additional questions, but thank you guys for. Oh, I have another one. As I try to wrap up, are there any tools to combine with Tableau training?
So I mean, it kind of depends on what your role is. So I do a lot of data visualization, but I also do a lot of data prep. So tools like Tableau Prep and Alteryx would be very helpful. SQL is always a good skill to have. Yeah, I would say focus on probably the data preparation and data visualization. All right. Well, while we're waiting, as I mentioned before, please reach out anytime. I'd love to connect with you. You can find me on Twitter. My tag there is Be More Was Taken. This years ago, I tried to sign up with Be More and it was taken. So you can also find me on LinkedIn. Please check out my Tableau Public profile, and check out our website, domorewithdata.com.
All right, one question we have is, do you have an example of, or can you show any of the XY coordinate stuff you've done? Is there anything maybe that you have on Tableau Public that you could speak to that uses that? Or obviously, I don't know enough about the topic to really.
Sure, let me bring up my Tableau
Awesome.
Public profile. Yeah, so I mean, I don't have any of these workbooks up to be able to share, but pretty much every one of these visualizations uses just polygons, lines, and the XY coordinates. So like this one here, which is probably definitely not really a data viz, but one of the funnest things I ever built is you can use all of these options over here to build out these really cool designs. You can design your own mandala, but this whole thing is just math to calculate thousands and thousands of data points. So each one of these curved lines is probably 100 data points that I'm calculating the X and Y coordinates for, and doing that over and over again for thousands of records. Yeah, I mean, pretty much all of these, this one, use just math to calculate those coordinates. And if you're interested in learning a little bit more about that, I recently wrote a blog series on our website and on Clear Intelligence website called Fun with Curves in Tableau. It's a 3-part series where you can learn about how to do some of these calculations. So how to draw circles, how to draw the sigmoid curves, and how to draw Bezier curves. All right. Well, if you end up thinking of any other questions or just didn't want to ask them here, again, please feel free to reach out to me.
All right, well, thanks everybody. I guess we can wrap up a couple minutes early. Brian, thank you for sharing your story, for engaging with us here and answering some questions. We'll make sure to follow up with everyone, share Brian's Twitter, his Tableau Public, all of that. Check out the Doing More with Data blog. You can see that and other content on clearintelligence.com. We're trying to add new content all the time, so check that out. And yeah, we're all super available. Brian, Jackie, Dustin, we have a great group of data viz, solid pros. So, don't hesitate to reach out. And thanks for joining us, everybody. Appreciate it. And hope to do this again sometime. And Brian, thanks so much for sharing what you do.
Thanks, everybody.